which I'm sure we're all starting to appreciate these days, as we're being a little bit more informal about how we all work, as we're all online all of the time. We're becoming a little bit more human, aren't we, as opposed to pretending that our lives are perfect. We're actually showing the untidy bedrooms or whatever behind our screens when we're on Teams or Zoom meetings. Anyway,
the lack of my technical abilities, in fact, Melanie. Right, let me start with your lovely introduction, because you definitely deserve it, and thank you very much for the filler there. So I'm hoping it's the dog under the lavender bush and not your dad there, but hello and welcome everybody. Thank you very much for joining us for today's APMG webinar. This is a repeat of one that we did yesterday evening UK time, and hopefully this is a more convenient time to you. I'm Estelle Hicks-Bennett. I'll be your host and moderator today. You're in for a treat with Melanie Franklin. She's a regular guest on APMG. Many of you will be familiar with her background, but for the benefit of those that aren't, Melanie's an experienced practitioner, trainer and consultant in all things agile, project, program and change management, as well as playing a huge part in the Change Management Institute UK chapter, and has a time-consuming habit of championing her candidates to achieve bigger and better things. In today's webinar, Melanie will draw from the latest training in change management and provide guidance on how to deal with the current challenges we have, but most importantly, how to deal with what's coming next. I know it's going to be an information-packed production as always, so before I hand over again to Mel, I'll just remind you quickly that you will be on mute for the duration of the webinar, but please do pop your questions in the question and chat panel. It will be recorded and we will share the slides and the recording with you afterwards. Do please take part in the poll questions, because it helps Melanie to adapt the content as she goes along. And finally, we do welcome your feedback so that we can give you the content that you would like for these webinars going forward. Okay, Mel, over to you. Thank you.
Lovely. Well, I want to talk about training in change management, but actually, to be honest, I'm going to talk a lot about the issues and the current context of change management, what's going on and the trends that we're seeing. I'm currently running two major change programs, one in the UK, one US, and one in the Middle East. I'm also responsible for building the internal change management capability for a couple of other organisations. I run an informal thought leadership panel, one for CEOs and one for directors of transformation around the world. So chatting all the time about what we're seeing and what our challenges are. So I thought I'd bring that to bear this morning, and we'll have a talk about what change management really means and why it's so important, and the core skills that are needed. And I will talk about the APMG's new qualification, of which I'm the chief examiner, but I'm not great on the big sales pitch. I wouldn't listen to a webinar like that, so I don't expect you to. I'm going to talk more about what's really important to us, and then I'll just leave you with some information about the actual course. As Estelle said, just send questions in wherever, and if she sees something pop up that she thinks she ought to interrupt me with, she will do, but certainly I'm leaving plenty of time for questions at the end, so please make this as interactive as possible. And let's start with, I'd really like to know about your role in change management, and then the next question is going to be about your qualifications. So if you could answer the poll, because it just gives me a sense of who I'm talking to, which again humanises what is, after all, something where I'm sitting here staring at my screen and you cannot see me. So tell us a little bit about your responsibilities in the world of change management, because it gives me an idea of why this webinar.
Okay, so those responses are coming in, Mel. As I always remind everybody, they don't always add up to 100% because you can answer more than one question, but we've got 30% change transformation manager, 32% line management role, 41% project program professional, and 21% other.
Okay, right, well, there we go. If you want to put other in the chat at any point and let Estelle know what your other roles are, but it's very interesting mix there from the project program management and the change management. And the next poll that Estelle's putting up, we're only doing these two to start with, is about the qualifications that you have, whether or not you're qualified. I'm just trying to get a sense of the audience that I'm talking to. So if you could just click on that, that will be helpful. So a third of you are change and transformation, a third of you are line management, and just over a third are in the project and program management world. There we go. It's interesting. Yesterday, we only had 3% of people who are in line management roles. So that was a very interesting evening. So what have we got on this poll then, Estelle? Estelle's left me again. I think she's having technical issues today. Oh, there you are, you're back.
Right, 64% change transformation manager, 15% line management role, 57% project program professional, and 12% other.
Okay, so those are the qualifications, are they?
No, they're not, are they, Mel? Sorry, that's this is definitely not my day, is it? Because those are the polls that I've put in, but I've obviously got the different questions in there. So sorry, we'll have to come back to that one.
Okay, all right, well, that's fine. Let's move on. But I understand that I'm talking to change and project managers and line managers. What I wanted to talk about was the way the world has changed in terms of change management and the impact that it's having on all of us. And I've been doing this for 30 years, and I started as a business analyst. I moved into project and program management, and then I moved into change management. And what interests me, particularly in my role as I was a CEO for 12 years, I'm a board advisor, and it's the strategic time frame that I think we've been moving sort of ever shorter over the last few years. Certainly when I first started work, we used to talk about the short term being 1 to 3 years, the medium term being 5 to 10 years, and the long term being sort of 10 years plus. That has shortened, and certainly in the last decade, I think we'd all agree that most people would write a 5-year plan. But in fact, in the last few years, that has shortened to perhaps a 3-year plan. And in fact, increasingly over the last few years, I'm working with organisations who strategically, and this is at the CEO level, are tending to look 1 to 2 years out, because the fear is that any further than that, and there are so many circumstances that are changing, that you can have some idea of the general direction of where the organisation is heading, but actually getting into any kind of planning too far out, and you're wasting your energy. And I think what we've all experienced probably in this crisis is that many organisations are now looking ahead the next 3 to 4 months to make significant decisions and announcements, and that's about it. This week alone, I've been talking to organisations who feel comfortable sort of stating the next few months. So give you an example, many of them are wrestling with the where do our staff work, particularly if they're in service industries. So a UK financial institution has made the decision it is not bringing anybody back into another organisation is saying we're not even having that conversation until September. So the conversation won't start until September, and then we'll make a decision, and a few months after that we might decide to do so. Google has come out and sort of said it's sort of saying 10 to 30% of its staff are coming back over the next few months, but it's got an idea that that will be the maximum level, and about 70% are going to sort of work from home going forward. But again, they haven't nailed every aspect of that policy because they're trying to work it out. And I think that at the moment is the best that we can hope for. And I think that in a VUCA world, the volatility, the uncertainty, the complexity and the ambiguity that we're all so familiar with, I think is having a big impact. So that's a trend that's been happening, and I'm sure that we'll get back into the sort of 1 to 2 to 3 years going forward. But we know that too far out in this world is difficult. I did read a really compelling document this week, which was the 5-year plan for a large construction organisation. But what I felt was interesting is that it was 2018 to 2023, and whilst it gave me a sense of what was important to the organisation at that point in time, and they had 5 major strategic objectives, really even those big ideas, one of them looked just anachronistic as a result of the last few months. And so again, it just points that maybe those 5-year timeframes are becoming difficult to sort of be believable, if anything else. But I think something else is at work here as well, in that when we were doing that longer term planning. Certainly a decade ago, what you would expect is that during that sort of longer term, we would expect a few changes in direction. To accommodate changes in the market or technology or the regulatory environment. But however, we would fairly broadly stick to what we were doing. But of course, over time, I think what we're starting to see, as you can see here, is that actually the wiggle room is growing, and that we might facilitate a little bit more on what we were going to do and maybe change a little bit of direction until we've got to what looks like a huge sort of shift. And I think we all recognise this as well, in that we now hear about organisations who use the phrase fail fast. Fail's always a difficult word to use emotionally, but it's this idea that they're prepared to pivot, if you like, to a new direction, a new idea, if the first one isn't delivering the results that they expected. So it's not that we commission something and we are going to do it come what may, but actually we celebrate the fact now that if things aren't quite right, that we are prepared in this more agile world to shift and do something different, which is absolutely great. But I think we need to look at what the impact of that is. And of course, the first impact is that there is a much higher volume of change because we are willing to change direction when we don't get the results we're looking for. But also, that means that those changes have a much shorter lifespan themselves. Now, what does that do? Well, it first of all increases the uncertainty because every single day we are confronted with yet more change and a change of direction. And we have to maintain a sort of openness to flexibility as we try to get our heads around it. That shorter lifespan, it also, of course, increases the volume of change that at any one point that we're actually asking people to assimilate. And I think what we need to sort of look at here in terms of change is the impact on individuals. Now, what I've done here is just to try to sort of summarize in these two little boxes here, the box and the tick, what really change is all about. And of course, change is a mixture of the tangible change that we create through the project management end of things. So we provide the new features, we provide new functionality, but we also provide things like new policies, new standards, new processes, new organisation structure. I was talking to somebody yesterday who unfortunately is in the middle of providing a new building for his organisation, which now that we're moving to more virtual working is proving even more of a headache than normal. But it is that sort of tangible change that says, okay, we're building or we're developing something that didn't exist before. But we all recognise that having something new isn't the same as actually working in a new way. Of course, what that structural change actually does is it triggers the behavioural change, which is when people internalise it and actually answer the question, okay, how do I need to work differently? And it's being able to work out what perhaps our new activities are, our new processes, maybe new relationships with different colleagues. I'm sure we've all been through this in the last 10 to 12 weeks through the period of lockdown, where I've been doing online work like the rest of you for years, but when it's completely imposed upon you, I remember the first morning that I started, which was a Sunday working in the Middle East. I was doing 4 days of workshops. The lockdown started on the Saturday here in Spain. I flew in on that Saturday morning, luckily enough to look after my dad, and I started work. And normally, if I'm going into my office, I have a lovely office in the Middle East, which is I've got a great training room. I've got the flip charts. I've got huge TV screens where I share the slides. We've got tables, chairs, all the stationaries there, and we're all just ready to go. And whilst I might be fighting jet lag on that Sunday morning, I just grab my bag from my hotel room, go into the office and get started. But of course, I spent on that first Sunday morning, I was up in the middle of the night. I spent several hours trying to get everything ready. The level of nerves, even though I know my subject, I was worried about technical issues. I was worried about how I was going to come across, how I was going to hang it all together, how people were going to have a great experience. And so I was the personification of that learning dip that we can see in this curve here, where my productivity shot down. I mean, I spent 2.5 hours just organizing myself. I wouldn't normally have to do that. So that's 2.5 hours of productive time that I lost. And that's a typical thing about the impact of change. It doesn't matter how big or small the change is. The brain is screaming, "Oh, this is different. Oh, not sure what I'm supposed to be doing with this." So we slow down, we become more deliberate, we become more thoughtful, we gather more information, we go more slowly as we try things out. Of course, then we realize that we've made some mistakes, so we need to claw back some time to put those right. And we also have to have that emotional resilience to, when we've made a mistake, keep on going and have a bit of a go without beating ourselves up too much. So that is the impact of any change. And if I felt like that after 30 years in business of moving everything to Microsoft Teams, well, we can imagine that with all of the changes that we're currently making, how people are actually feeling. And I think this is the other issue. If we look at that structural and behavioural change and try to assimilate those two together, but the impact on individuals is, of course, that there isn't just one change in town. We are all experiencing multiple changes all at the same time, and they're all at different stages in their life cycle. So I might be feeling fairly optimistic about something that I've had a chance to practice for a few times now, but there are other things that are looming out there that I'm still not sure how to make work, and I know I've got to carve out some time to have a real go at those. And so I've got this constant anxiety, this constant anxiousness that, can I fit it all together? Do I know what I'm doing? Have I lost my way? One of the things that I think we should look at is those emotional feelings. So when we're actually going through any kind of change, what's happening is that we've got sort of this life cycle model. At the start, what's happening is that I'm trying to go, right, okay, what's different? Right, what am I trying to live without? What do I need to remember not to do? What do I need to remember to try out for the first time? And then we start to get into, right, okay, let's have a practice of something. Right, what is it that I need to learn today? Should I take some notes? How am I going to bed that down? Can I carve out some time to have a really good think and really concentrate on this new thing while everything else is happening around me? And then once I've done that, we start to come out the other side, because I'm now starting to think, okay, right, this is the new norm for me. So this is starting to become my new habit. Who else do I need to tell about this? Who else do I need to sort of let them know that this is our new way of working? I wrote a paper over the weekend about staff who've been furloughed, who we might start to consider bringing back. I'm working with one organisation where we're starting to think about how we bring people back in the next 4 to 6 weeks. And one of the things I thought about was this particular curve. As I have been going through the seismic changes on my programs about how we've reorganized our work, how we've reprioritized some things. And I'm obviously in the green circle now for many of these, but my colleagues who were furloughed have missed all of that. I'm somewhat envious that they've missed all of the stomach churning sort of emotion of the real stress of trying to get through lots of different changes in a very short space of time. But at the same time, I'm also aware that, not having had that experience, I've got an obligation, if you like, to try to work out what are all the changes, what are all the new habits and the new ways of doing things that I can communicate to them. Because if I don't communicate it to them, if we don't onboard them, if you like, in a respectful and elegant way, then I'm going to get a little bit concerned that we're going to have a them and us situation. Those of us who've experienced the change and those who haven't. So I've got those worries now in the back of my mind. And on top of that, when it comes to sort of how the world works, we know that actually we've been dealing on the right hand side with all the change, the business, all the improvements, enhancements, and, to be honest, survival activities we've been sort of putting in place. At the same time, we're still trying to sort of run the business. So still invoices still need to be paid, meetings still need to be arranged, reports still need to be created, customers still need to be serviced. So we've got people who are experiencing huge amounts of change, but actually we're asking them to spend the majority of their time on their day job. So we're asking them to find additional time to do all of these things, which is why on my first day, I got up virtually in the middle of the night, 4:30 in the morning, because I needed 2.5 hours just to carve out enough time to try to make sense of the initial changes I was experiencing. And I know this from an informal survey I've been running for years, way before this COVID crisis, which is that when I ask people about where they're getting the time for change, an awful lot of them will talk about the fact that, you know, they've got a full-time day job. So they're coming in early, they're staying late, they're giving up their lunch breaks. And one of the interesting things I also find is that when I'm on LinkedIn, I can see two things happening. I get lots of messages on a Saturday morning, and it's a sort of group of people who, the way they make sense of their world after a busy week and their busy day job, is Saturday mornings is where they take themselves off to sort of try to get a grip on what's been happening and reflect. And that's when they sometimes make contact and ask me questions and ask me to do things. And then there's another group who do the same thing, but they do that on a Sunday evening because that's when they're about to get started for work, and they're coming back in on a Monday morning, and therefore they're just sort of putting the world to rights, if you like. But I think that indicates that people are spending an awful lot of time trying to sort of assimilate, both run the business and change the business. The level of change isn't going away. So I thought we ought to sort of reflect on that and the impact on individuals. I'd be really interested in your opinions now, because Estelle's going to run this poll, because I'm quite interested to hear what you have to say about what you think the biggest impact is on people with the amount of change that's actually taking place at the moment.
Thanks, Mel, and I'm very pleased to say this one has got the right answers in there, and I have adjusted the other one if you did want to come back to it. Just whilst people are answering the poll, if you can just put your answers in there saying which ones you feel are the biggest pressure that you're feeling for those impacted by change. I have got a couple of questions that have been thrown in, Mel, that you can either take at the end, and I'm going to say both of them to you now. One is, do you think more people working from home could cause issues in the future with building team relationships and ultimately landing and embedding the change? And someone else has asked, do you think that acknowledgement of grieving feelings early on in the change cycle is more important? Do you think we need to learn more about handling grief? So.
Okay, yep, I will quite happily talk about both of those right now, if you like. You hold the poll question. Actually, if I can just go back, I'll keep this diagram in mind while I'll answer that. First of all, let me deal with the grief question. I think we should acknowledge more of the grief, and this is why I've put up in my sort of red box there that the first thing that I'm actually trying to assimilate when I'm experiencing change is what am I trying to live without? What am I trying to remember not to use or not to do anymore? And I am starting from that position of loss and what I'm remembering not to do, as much as sort of trying to get to grips with the new thing, because I think that really goes to the heart of the fact that I'm bringing with me probably a lot of anxiety and anger sometimes. I recognised, well, I was so busy trying to cope with my new online life, but I did go through a period of grief. I was upset. I missed things that I didn't realise were so important to me. I missed getting on my commuter train every morning, which gave me half an hour just to get my head together. I missed seeing the lovely lady who used to make me breakfast every morning in the cafe that I used to visit on the way to work. And I missed that society with her, just chatting about her life and what's going on with her. And I miss seeing the reception staff that I always used to greet in the mornings and just having that society. Now, a lot of what I'm missing is the time to think and the time to be with people. But I was very conscious that, you know, I'm sad about that. I also was talking to my family about, I went through a period of a couple of weeks in of great anger. And the reason was that I realised that I'd had a very comfortable life. When running face-to-face workshops, chairing meetings face-to-face, doing planning sessions when you can quickly touch base with somebody else and say, well, this is where I'm up to, where are you? I realised that I knew how to do all of that. And actually, as a virtual leader, I'm having to develop much better virtual leadership skills, which I'll come on to with the next question. And I just got angry, actually. I said to my father, I said, because he said, you look tired. I said, of course I'm tired. I'm having to learn a whole new set of skills at a time when I was really busy already. And now I'm actually having to carve out time. I give myself about 45 minutes a couple of times a week where I actually sit down and learn new virtual tools. So whether it's putting poll questions into Microsoft Teams or trying to work out how a virtual interactive whiteboard works. So I've had to set aside learning time on top of everything else. So you can hear the anger, you can hear the upset in my voice. I'm tired and I'm busy and it's horrible, and change is not nice. We know the models, which are that any change makes us consciously incompetent. It shakes us out of that unconscious competence when we were quite happy, because we were in habit mode, and we could therefore have thinking time. Our brain could go happily along in the background getting stuff done that we knew how to do, which gave us so much more thinking time. So we are in this conscious incompetence moving to conscious competence mode. The emphasis there being on conscious, which is we have to be ever on, ever focused, because things aren't yet automatic, so we can't let anything drop. And I think in part that grief, accepting that actually every time we step onto this change curve, we're asking people to make a huge amount of mental effort, is something that I want them to sort of allow them to be able to say, and say, I'm grieving for the old habits. I also
Brilliant.
agree very much with the lady who said about the team relationships being so much harder. I totally agree. And I think for me about embedding change, where this becomes particularly difficult is because when we're all experiencing change at different paces, some changes really fit with some people and they get on with it really quickly. Others of us are struggling and working our way through. But the thing is, it is so much harder to informally sort of share where you're up to. And I miss being able to physically see somebody else getting on with something and go, oh, that's how they're doing it. Oh, that makes sense. I should do that. I miss that informality. And of course, that is what this virtual world is snatched away from us, is the little informality where we could just have a catch up in the kitchen at work, or just go out to lunch with somebody, even if it's just a quick sandwich, where you sort of catch up on experiences. We don't do that quite as much when we're in this sort of formal mode. Have you noticed we book 30-minute, 60-minute or 2-hour meetings? And even though we try to do a bit of socializing at the beginning, it's a lot harder to exchange that sort of informal information. And for me, when you're bedding down change, it's hearing the stories from others about how they're experiencing it that helps me learn new ways of doing it. And I don't think that we've yet involved those stories into how we're behaving online. So that, I think, is making change much harder to embed.
Thanks, Mel, and sorry for throwing that right in the middle. And I'm definitely testing your agility today, and you're doing brilliantly. Thank you. So in answer to the poll questions there, I don't know if you can see the answers there on the screen. I'm showing them. 38% are saying finding the time to take part is the biggest pressure. 55% feeling fatigued by unrelenting pace of change. 41% not knowing which change to prioritise, 38% finding the time to practice new ways of working, and no others at the moment.
Well, those are very high numbers, aren't they? And I think that shows there are even higher numbers than yesterday evening when we ran the same poll. And I think that just goes to the heart of what I think we're all really quite concerned about, is that how do we assimilate change? How do we find the time for it? So the reason I'm sort of talking about these things is, why does all of this matter? I think it matters because we have to get very good at managing change. Change can no longer be seen as sort of something out there that can be managed separately from the day-to-day work. We need an approach that, for all of us who are impacted by change, is easy to follow, easy to sort of adapt into our day jobs, so that we can still deliver the excellent customer service, because our customers still want stuff from us. At the same time, we're trying to work out how to do things differently. So I think I've talked about this before, but I think this crisis has really pushed front and centre the need to democratise change management skills, to actually push the leadership of change down into small groups, informal groups of people, where we've talked about having change agents who are able to lead themselves and their immediate colleagues through change. And certainly in this virtual world, I'm certainly seeing that need for localization, as in locally with the group that your sphere of influence, if you like, the group that you spend most time with. Actually, that's the group that you're most likely to be able to help through the change cycle. So certainly pushing that set of skills down into this wider group is becoming really important. And if I do a quick sort of poll of my clients, and also what I'm hearing as a request from so many organizations, is that it's, how do we establish a network of change agents? How do we empower them? How do we train them up? In other words, change management is now being so much more recognized as a critical skill, that we are moving very fast away from, oh well, we'll bring in some specialists to do it, because that would be doing change to people. And frankly, it's a basic physics answer, I think, which is that, frankly, there aren't enough consultants in the world to be able to handle the volume of change that everybody's experiencing. So if people can't lead change for themselves, then we've got a real problem. So I'm starting to see that we need to really be supporting individuals through change. And I think if I go back to this very simple idea of structure and sort of the structural and behavioural, I think what we're starting to see is the need for both sort of two types of skills. So let's have a sort of look at these in a bit more detail. I think that we need some very simple sort of tools and an approach. We need something where people go, right, this is how we do change around here. Just like we've got a well worked out routine for, right, okay, this is how we set up a virtual meeting, or this is how we do the financial reporting. We shouldn't have to make this up every single time. So we need something that's really easy to use, really easy to sort of adapt to. It shouldn't be something that needs a 2 to 3 week training course that's so full of jargon and sort of something that's a real specialist thing that only a few amazing people could ever possibly grasp. It's got to be rooted in common sense. It can't be full of terminology. It's got to be intuitive, and that means it's got to have a natural flow. It's got to be easy to guess what comes next, and it's got to be repeatable. It's got to be so easy that you can actually build up leading a change initiative, knowing how to get started. What should I do first? What should I do next? And that it's got to be, applicable to all types of change. Because these days, and this is why I get so frustrated when people talk to me about things like, oh, it's IT enabled change. And I'm thinking, well, no, everything is everything. You might put in a new system, but that means that we also have to have new processes and new ways of working. It means we have to have a new organisation structure. We need new KPIs. We need new standards and policies. So basically, all change has all of those elements within it usually. So I don't think that we should sort of say, oh, for this is a system change, or this is a process change, that there should be any difference. So we need a simple sort of roadmap or methodology or framework, whatever you want to call it, for how we manage change. And at the same time, the time has come to sort of really provide people with the ability to do the human bit of change, to enable people to sort of enthuse and influence and persuade people and maintain the momentum. I was doing a piece with a client yesterday, and it did make me laugh that I was using from the Agile Change Agent course, actually, I was using the benefits dependency network. I've signed up for, probably shouldn't say this online, but I've signed up for a course. I'm obviously not going to name it. It's on strategy, and I'm having a really bad experience with it. I've paid a lot of money for this online course, and I think I bought a lemon, in that the online course, you read materials and you watch the odd video. You're supposed to put comments in the chat function to be able to get learning credits to say that you've actually taken part in the course. But there's nobody else online, and there's only so few people have taken the course that there's no real comments to share, and those that are there seem very old, and you have to wait a week or two to be able to get a comment back, by which point you've completely forgotten it, so it's not in the moment. And the materials are sort of a bit old as well, and not particularly rigorous. But I paid a lot of money, and I was trying to enthuse and influence and persuade myself yesterday by using these techniques to sort of get back on track and go, come on, you've invested, see it through to the end. So build up my own resilience when there are so many other calls on my time. And I thought that was quite interesting, in that because I have all of these change management skills at my disposal, I know all the techniques, that I'm starting to apply them to myself to keep myself going. And it just shows, I think, how important these skills are, because for all change, we have to lead ourselves and then others through the change. It's a bit like, if you can remember plane journeys, if you remember air travel, that when they make the announcement about if the oxygen mask falls, you should put your own mask on before helping others. It's the same sort of thing. I need to be able to use those skills to enthuse myself before I can possibly enthuse others to get on board with something. So I think that, this democratization, let's call it what we need. We need both the structure and we need the skills. So, for example, with a structure, I think we should set out a very, very simple life cycle model. The first wave of change, a little bit of time given over in iteration 1 there, to sort of getting a grip. What are we changing? What's the scope of the change? What's the end goal? What are the benefits? Whatever documentation your organisation insists you create, we still need those questions answered. We should set aside a little bit of time for that. But after that, we should actually work out wave after wave, iteration after iteration of change, and start to set out a very simple plan. You can see how simple this is. What's the overall time frame? How am I going to chunk that up? What are the key outcomes at the end of each of those chunks? And within that, can I run a sort of simple process? In the Agile Change Agent course, we've got something that says getting started, making progress and realizing benefits, which gives you a clue just how simple the language is. And within that making progress, you might even want to divide that into boxes of time. So time boxes or sprints. But it's a really simple, repeatable structure that anybody can use. And getting started, making progress and realizing benefits is just so simple that everybody understands the terminology. So I think that structure is in there. That roadmap is incredibly important. And then that has to be coupled with the sort of skills that we're talking about. I think that relationship building is incredibly important. And to be fair, in the course, we do some work on the relationship with yourself, personal awareness, which a lot of us know is the core to emotional intelligence. Dr. Daniel Goleman talks about self-awareness, and then that leads to a choice of whether or not you wish to self-manage. I can choose to tune myself up or down a little bit, depending on the audience I'm with and what they need from me. But unless I've got some awareness of how I come across normally and how other people see me, I'm going to find that difficult to tune up or down. So it starts with us. And then we go on to the sort of the personal leadership, actually looking at how do we build, and this goes back to virtual leadership as well for that excellent question. It goes back to how do I build my sort of social capital so that people want to be sort of led by me, if you like, that people that I come across as sort of believable. in some respects, and how important that is. I was looking this morning at, there's a whole load of techniques in the Agile Change Agent course, which is around things like, there's a technique on my world, your world, appreciating the differences between us, the now or next, whether I like to work in the future or the present, am I big picture or dig deep, and there's some really fantastic sort of skills in there, little techniques that help build that ability. And I'm a big fan of that, because I think that this skills transference and building up the capability in other people enables them to handle things fantastically well. And I think at the end of the day, looking at this and the sort of the ability to set a culture or an environment that supports and reassures is vital. So we should be doing that skills transference. But why is this balance so important? And the old CEO in me always can't help but look at the bottom line. And when I think about, why is this balance so important to organizations? Well, I think this is when we're getting into what does change management actually give us? And I think the first thing is that it reduces stress. For a start, if we are going to recognise the importance of change management, because it will stop us pretending that all roles remain unchanged. As the pace of change has increased, we've demanded that staff develop an ability to lead themselves and others through change. But what we haven't done is reflect this in their role descriptions. And therefore, they're still performance managed only on the run the business part of where they spend their time, and not on the change the business. They're expected to sort of perform, run the business and change the business, but only gets that duality isn't recognised in their performance metrics. So I think we need to call time on that. And I think also this change management training reduces stress, because it explicitly states what you need to do. And it encourages people to sort of say, do you know what? There is a simple roadmap for you to follow. This is how you divide up the time. This is what you should be looking at happening. Keep it a simple flow, but it really isn't a mystery. It's not really complicated. It's quite straightforward. There's a life cycle to change. You should lead yourself through that simple life cycle. And by the way, here are some of the emotional intelligence skills that will help you do that. So I think this is sort of core sort of skill set, but also I acknowledge that what it does for an organisation is it reduces risk. It reduces risk for a start that some of our star players simply quit and go, I'm going somewhere else because I just can't cope with the unrelenting pace of change, which is what you said in that quick poll about people are really struggling to assimilate the volume of change and find the time to do it. And sometimes the easiest thing is to say either I'm quitting completely, or I'm going to go and take some unplanned absence, so maybe a bit of sick leave. And I think there's real financial benefits for an organisation in that if I can build up the skills for people to be able to manage change, we land change with less disruption, we land change earlier. So I get an earlier return on investment, and I get it at less cost. Because one of the huge costs, the unrecognised cost of change, is the amount of time and energy we have to spend, for example, when we handle it badly, dealing with negative rumours and concerns and worries, and the amount of time we have to spend bolstering staff back up again when they've been frightened by what might be coming their way. All of those costs in terms of management time, and for the third of you that are line management on this webinar, you know as well as I do that that's unproductive time, that if we hadn't created a sort of negative situation, we wouldn't have to be spending time on it. So if we can get good at change, then it actually has a huge financial benefit for an organisation. You can see that I spend a lot of time with finance directors explaining the value of investing in change management, can't you? And who needs these skills? Well, what tends to happen is we've got a lot of people who are in the business who are trying to walk on both sides of run the business, change the business. But we also have our dedicated project teams within programs, within the portfolio as a whole. We've got the project manager who's doing both the structural and behavioural change. We've got the project experts sort of surrounding them. but also we really do know that it's a sort of hybrid team, isn't it? Because we bring in those people from the business. And frankly, the reason that I think it's so important to sort of get this training out to everybody is that we are in a hybrid team now, and there's some commonality. The team are all time poor. They need practical techniques. They need to know the what and the how, not the whys. So perhaps some of the methodological stuff, some of the theories and models, all of the background to something is not what they need. They just want to be able to solve a problem in the moment. How do I get started with this change? How do I encourage this person to come on board with this change? How do I deal with the negative resistance I'm experiencing with this change? And we need to recognize that people want to know the answers without necessarily feeling that they need to go into a deep dive of study to become experts outside of their field. Project managers don't necessarily want to dig deep and become change experts, and those from in line management positions within the business who are quite happy being the finance manager, the marketing manager, the ops manager, don't necessarily want to see themselves as change management professionals either. So I think the time, this is why I think the Agile Change Agent qualification is selling so well around the world. And so many organizations are talking to me about it because it is absolutely practical, not theoretical. So it is all about skills and techniques and being able to do something that you couldn't do before, not know something that you didn't know before. And it's that doing, especially now when we're all really time poor. I think the thing is that it reflects what we all experience, which is change these days is agile, and that we do wave after wave of change. We don't sort of gather all of our ideas about and manage it in that more traditional waterfall way, where we gather all the requirements and we're going to put them in come what may, and we might have to wait 9 to 12 months for that moment. No, we do change in short waves, sometimes only a couple of weeks at a time. So it brings together the best of agile and it brings together the best of the change management activities. So it doesn't assume knowledge, but if people come to the table with some knowledge, that's great. They can build on that. But what it does do, and I've had 2 clients this week who've both said that the reason that they wanted to use the Agile Change Agent course is that they wanted something that navigated through the worlds, particularly of Agile, and gave them one simple language that everybody could understand. They've got people within their organization who are Scrum Masters, certified product owners, who are scaled Agile framework practitioners, some of whom have worked on large-scale Scrum in other organizations. They all have lots of terminology, but they're not able to sort of explain it to others and take others with them. And so they just want something like getting started, making progress, realizing benefits that everybody goes, okay, that makes sense, get that. And so that simple knowledge brings people together. And I think that, coupled with all the practicality around the course, is really important. I put this in to sort of show you that if you can see the orange boxes there are the activity boxes, and I think that gives you a clue about just how much activity there is in terms of the Agile Change Agent course. So hopefully that gives you a sort of a flavour of that there's an awful lot of things happening in change, but we're at a crisis point. We need to upskill as many people as possible in being able to manage themselves through change and to feel confident about doing that. Because if we can take away that stress of, I really don't know what I'm doing here, then they can concentrate on making the changes. And I don't think organisations, we have much of a choice now. We've hit that nadir of people are completely overwhelmed. It is a massive mental health crisis in terms of the stress at work. We need to address that by saying, do you know what? There are some things that are simple and workable that we can do for you. Let's explain what change management's about and how you actually put change in place. We deal with change every day in every aspect of our lives, but actually we can make it easier for you because there are known techniques that work. They're simple to apply. There's a simple framework of how you set out how a change can be organised. Let's give you some of these tools and let's really empower you. And I passionately believe we're at that point. And I thought I'd sort of hopefully the screen will let me, I thought I'd put this up because this is something that I have as a poster in my office wall, because it's part of my job to build the capability internally in organisations for people to manage change. And this was just a quick scribble a while ago of me sort of just trying to sort of work out what all the benefits were, and I thought I'd sort of leave that with you to have a look. But improves staff engagement, improves confidence, increases available resources, and on the right there, reduces total cost of implementing change. And you can look at that how you want to. Reduces the total cost financially, or reduces the total cost mentally, because I think there is a mental cost to it. And for that reason, that's why I really am incredibly proud to be associated with a course that delivers so much practical activity. So that's me talking about change this morning. I know you've got some questions there, Estelle, so fire away.
I have indeed. Thanks, Mel. And I know that everybody's got to get off very shortly, so let me crack through these. What evidence have we seen that links MBTI E-types struggling more with unconscious competence, learning the survival, and learning stress?
Okay, so what we're talking about here is a Myers-Briggs type indicator, that's MBTI, and we're talking about extroverts. And the thing about extroverts is that they make sense of the world by verbalizing. They make sense of the world through their social connections, talking things through with people, and they get their energy from those social connections. They get their energy from people. I can only give you anecdotal evidence. I've been running a support group for some chief executives in this lockdown because they are so much on the extrovert scale, and they make sense of their world by bouncing around their organizations, talking to everybody and getting their energy from all the people that they work with. And to go from that into lockdown has proved hugely problematic. And actually, they've used me as a sort of sounding board to just talk at me and make, I know that they're using me to verbalize their ideas that they would normally bounce around, informally their own management team and other staff in the canteen and all sorts of places. So I certainly know that anecdotal evidence shows that they have suffered more than most, and therefore when it comes to the virtual leadership, where I know that I've got those extroverts, what I have done is I have set up away from Microsoft Teams or Zoom calls, I've actually done just the, pick up the phone, actually let's have an informal chat stuff. I've also done the virtual gin and tonic sessions and the virtual coffee morning sessions as well. So I don't know if that helps you, but certainly I would totally agree with the comment. I've seen lots of anecdotal evidence around this. Okay, next question.
That's great. Thanks, Mel. So this sort of leads in, nice segue from what you were saying. Simon's saying, apart from adapting to standard digital tools, e.g. Zoom, Teams, etc., do you foresee a greater need for change management of more complex technologies such as AI, digital automation? Will they become the norm?
Well, I have to be honest, and I would say because of my CEO group and my Directors of Transformation group, that the one thing, and this comes to the heart of finance directors, when it comes to the programs that have been mothballed and the programs that have got the go-ahead or the continuation when it comes to financing, they all have something in common, which is they are all automation, they are all streamlining. So whether or not that goes as far as AI in an organization, because sometimes automation doesn't go that far, it might be robotic process automation, but certainly I am absolutely seeing the evidence that when it comes to, and some organizations have sort of saying we're going to be, we're putting business cases together now for things that are going to start in September, but they all have this one thing in common, which is we need to be working smarter. I mean, honestly, I could get a mug printed with the word smarter, but the number of times it comes up in conversations every single week. We need to automate. If we're in a more virtual world, I mean, the one impact has been, none of us have got loads of paper. A huge impact has been that a lot of people haven't even got a printer at home, let alone printing out loads of bits of paper. And why would they need paper? They're not going into meetings, they're not carrying a bundle of papers. And so you're starting to see that people are going, do you know what, we probably shouldn't have to have that or that or that. So they're already starting to streamline informally, but certainly I'm seeing the evidence that those are the projects that apps think the go ahead. So that'll be, I think that's going to be the big issue. If you know how to automate, if you know how to do efficiency and smarter working projects, then perhaps you won't have a problem with employability in the next couple of years.
The person of the future. We'll take two more, Mel. There's lots here, so I'll send these to you afterwards, but we'll do two more. One from Donna, who's saying, how can we make innovation for everybody and not just for strategy?
I think this goes back to my democratization of change management, in that if we can sort of demystify what change management in hand with empowering people to take the responsibility for innovation wherever they are. Because innovation is something we need to cascade right through the organization, because some of the best innovations are those people who are perhaps at the sharp end of dealing with a particular customer issue day after day and have worked out a far better way of getting the answer to a customer. We need to make sure that within our organization we have ways of hearing those innovations, but I think what encourages people to raise them is if they feel they know how to then make that change happen. So I've been doing an awful lot of training for organizations in the last 10 weeks with their sort of their leaders of the future groups and their sort of high performing people who we're sort of saying, right, this is how we make change management happen. These are all the skills you need, because we're partnering the fact that we found that these are people that are actively innovating, and we want to give them the skills to take the innovation forward themselves. So I see the two are absolutely connected, because I think change management training gives you the confidence to speak up, because if somebody loves your idea and they say, go on, then make it happen, you feel a lot more confident if you know how to make it happen. So I think that's definitely one of the things to think about.
Fantastic. And actually, I can answer this final question that we're going to do. Yes, we will be sharing the slides, so they will be coming with you soon. If you could just be patient with us. I'm going to say thank you very, very much indeed to you, Mel, for an absolutely fantastic webinar. You just pack it with information. I don't know how you do it. And before we close right on time, I will leave the last words with you before I close the webinar. Thank you so very, very much, Mel. Over to you.
Oh, it's been a pleasure, and I love talking about this stuff. I was only entering into a conversation online last night with somebody who was saying, you know, has the sense of urgency been part of our success in making so much change happen in the last few weeks? And I absolutely came down on the case of, yes, we need to always set a really passionate rationale for change. I hope I'm setting a passionate rationale for why we should educate others in building that change management skill within themselves. It builds their confidence, and it's better for our organizations. We need to keep innovating. We need to keep changing. If we've hit this crisis point of so much change is overwhelming, we need to tackle it, because what we need right now is organizations to thrive for the sake of all of our economies. If you want to get hold of me via LinkedIn, you just need to Google my name and you'll see that I was having a good hair day when they took the photograph. You can find me Melanie Franklin 1 on LinkedIn. I'll happily enter into a conversation and I'll happily answer questions. So thanks very much for listening.